All right, everybody, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. Coming at you live, I'm Peter Boulden. We got Craig in his alternate podcast room because his primary podcast room was filled today. And we're excited to have on today Dan DelMain of DelMain Analytics. And Dan and I connected a while back, and then I introduced him to Craig. And I have to say, of all the being that I come from a kind of a marketing background, if you will, Dan, I used to study this all the time. I come from a very healthy skepticism level when people kind of get in touch with me and say, hey, I've got the chops to kind of talk to you. And so I was super skeptical, but you very quickly alleviated some of those concerns, and you're the real deal. Give us a little bit of the background. I'm going to give you a little chance to kind of intro yourself here. Give us a little background of kind of DelMain, what you do and what you do for dentists, and kind of the genesis and how you got there.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So my name is Dan DelMain. DelMain Analytics, we are a full service digital marketing agency. Our tagline is we help small businesses get more customers through their websites, specifically helping dentists get more patients. In terms of the services that we provide, everything from search engine optimization, paid advertising, social media, copywriting, website design and development, a lot of buzzwords I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. And it's something that's very near and dear to the both of you because you both come from a very strong marketing background based on prior conversations we've had.
Yep. Well, we've both seen the fruits of that labor, if you will. But today we are going to talk about, something that Dan and I were offline collaborating about is really the future of online marketing and how to prepare your practice for like the year 2023. What's coming in the pipeline? What do we need to start building now and curating now, and going from there? So I like to talk to influence in this space because one of the questions I get commonly, Dan, from other dentists is like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's coming? What are you doing? What are you working on? Right? Because I think you always have to be asking those questions. And a lot of times I've worked on things in the past and that hasn't been the trajectory of the economy, if you will, or the landscape of advertising or marketing. And I've been wrong, but it's also fun to kind of just put your foot in the game and go for it. So, Craig, any comments so far? You're awfully quiet, and it's making me really nervous.
No, don't be nervous. My thought is, first of all, I get marketing and what a necessary portion of our business is to grow it, but it's more like innovation, marketing, experience. When I think of it, I think of the whole trifecta. I think marketing as its own thing is dead.
Correct.
You can hire people like Dan from DelMain, and full disclosure, I'm a paying client as well. I'm super impressed with them. But if you don't have something worth talking about, you're going to pay egregious amounts of money to move the needle on the who gives a shit meter. So in the spirit of giving the listener a holistic approach, I do believe it's innovation, marketing, and experience. Your experience is, what will drive your practice.
So Dan, one of the things that Craig and I talk about, and Craig, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying, is that it used to be in the landscape of, let's call it circa 2004 to 10, 11, 12, in that area, you could literally market your way to a profitable practice. And that was through spammy techniques, or you could just double down, or you could be the first one doing Google
landing pages,
AdWords. You could hire blog and do ghostwriting. I mean, like, you really could just almost gamify your way to the top in rankings, in traffic, in new patients. Now, granted, your retention might not be great, but if your end goal was focus and eyeballs and new patients, then you may have won that game. And then Google kind of started picking up on that, and as has our society as a whole, I believe, and the Penguin and all the algorithm updates, they kind of stripped out the shit. I think paved the way for people stripping out the shit and noticing shit businesses that shouldn't be propped up anymore. And so I think that's what Craig has always kind of talked about, is that the silo of being able to the quote unquote, the marketing silo is no longer a silo. It's intertwined with everyday fabric of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it is very much a holistic approach. And one of the things that we also noticed, or I also noticed in the early days of the internet, I've been in the industry for 10 plus years, is speaking of gamifying the system, like, especially from an online digital marketing standpoint, like you could do weird stuff where you have like, you could put white text on a white background and just overly keyword the heck out of that page. And then Google would just reward you with a first place result. And one of the things, like going back to like the organic, more holistic approach, like one of the things that we've seen with Google is they are humanizing their search engine more and more and more. So like all the people that were doing black hat or like gray hat techniques, like you can't get away with doing that. And that it's sort of the convergence of both what you're doing online and offline. Like Google pays attention to everything about your practice, to the point where it's surprising how much information that they have on you.
Yeah, I think what's important about that is it's what am I trying to say? Like they basically just are doing it for the end user, right? Like it's all about, for them, it's all about creating the best user experience. And they recognize that like spammy shit isn't a good user experience. So they want their sole purpose is to make sure like when you click once, you're getting exactly what you wanted. Right. And so
you're absolutely right. And I think that this is one of the reasons why, like back in the day when you had like Google and Alta Vista and Hotbot and all those search engines that were vying for that premier sort of that go-to spot, and Google kind of won the day. And I think it was because they quickly evolved their algorithm faster than those others. And to your point, Dr. Boulden, it's like, if you think about Google as having all these clients that are performing these searches, like they want to make their clients happy. So they want to show them the very best result. Anything that's spammy or informational or salesy, Google's going to do everything it can to bury it to the bottom.
All right. So now we've kind of talked about how things have changed to current day marketing, which, Craig and I talk about how big of an impact social has been on our practice, the social media and kind of that bucket. I'm saying again, not a silo because it's intertwined into the day-to-day operations of what we do. It's an amplification. How big reputation management has been. So everyone kind of listening to this knows about all the tenets of what it takes to kind of market in today's day and age. Agreed? I mean, if you've done any kind of reading, you kind of just know. So let's talk about some things that our advanced listeners should be keeping on the horizon, or just keeping their finger on the pulse of what could be headed. And you had talked about voice search, and I hear that a lot from I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, and I hear how he's triple down on voice because he just hears it as being the arbitrage of how we use our time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if you think about the evolution of how technology has evolved, like we're totally headed towards voice search. And I don't think it's an anomaly. I think it's here to stay. Yes, there were early adopters a couple of years ago, but again, I think it has much more staying power than people want to give it credit for. And if you think about the evolution of technology, so you have desktops, and those were sort of the most popular device. Then that moved to laptops, and then it moved to mobile phones. And lo and behold, it's like, what are people doing with their mobile phones? They're saying, "Hey Siri, can you find such and such?" And then that evolved into home devices where you can search directly on that. So it's the trajectory is there, it's here to stay, and it's going to continue to head that direction.
I mean, Craig, you and I both kind of went heavy on video for a while, and I think video's here to stay as well. It's just that voice is so hot, as is kind of podcasting, right? Because we're able to, it doesn't occupy our quote unquote time. We can do other things as we use our voice, but we can't do that as we're watching and listening and paying attention to a video. So that's why I think, as Gary Vaynerchuk says, that's the arbitrage of our time. Go ahead.
Well, I think there's two things. When we talk about like web, the original form of web, there was no content. So it was all about what we put out to the public. And so it was all about content marketing, landing pages, blogs, all that crap, video. And then there's so much content on the web now. And also the statistics say that it used to be that you need to hear something like 7 or 8 times before you were inclined to make a purchase. So there's frequency and reach. and those things in play, meaning like you had to hit the same person, 8 times before they made a call to action. There's so much noise now. I mean, like bananas have Minion stickers on them. You can't escape TV with, product placement everywhere. I mean, it's just the amount of noise is staggering. Your brain wants to conserve energy. Your brain doesn't want to get hooked on anything. So when you talk about voice search, yes, I don't want to go to weather.com to find out what time sunset is in Phoenix. I'll ask Siri, what time sunset? But when you want to say, hey, does Dr. Boulden do veneers? I think that's a larger decision. Like, I just bought a new car. I didn't ask Siri, hey, is the Ford Raptor a really good truck? I'm sorry?
It is.
I know, but I don't want to make a $60,000 purchase based on what Siri's telling me. So I think that, and you're going to be able to really hotwire the voice search. I mean, we all know Siri and Yelp have that strategic alliance. So I think that it's now about getting people to talk about you, the conversation happening about you. That's why I think the social is so credible.
But Dan, don't you see that kind of evolving into conversational, like AI bots or Siri bots or whoever bot being able to literally talk to, like if Craig had said, hey, how's the Ford Raptor? And it being like, well, quite honestly, it got some good reviews, but I really think, you should be thinking about this for your family or something like that. I mean, it's got to evolve that way, right? I mean, that's got to be on the realm of possibility. I hear what you're saying, Craig. You use it for very pithy questions, like what's the weather like? What's the, I don't know. What else? What's the best restaurant around me now? But it's gotta have to evolve, or else the adoption will just stay static. Dan?
Yeah, I think so. If you think about texting, right? Like texting, like it's like short, sweet, to the point. You just want to get on with it because your thumbs are getting tired. But some of the data that's coming out about voice search is it's evolving into a longer conversation. It's what we like to call in the digital marketing industry like long tail keyword searches or phrases. And I think that as more and more people get comfortable with those in-home listening devices, they will begin having longer conversations. And Google and Apple and Microsoft and all these in-home products, like they're going to get smarter at finding exactly what you're looking for. And what was that movie that recently came out about that person that fell in love with their device? Because
I heard it. Yeah, it's a little dark. I don't like dark. Those movies kind of creep me out a little bit, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the actor.
You guys aren't thinking Ex Machina, are you?
No. I'm blanking on the name.
This is Spider-Man. The Spider-Man guy was the actor, one of the Spider-Mans.
But I think, and I never actually saw the movie, but the premise is super interesting, and I think it kind of connects this conversation, and the fact that this person was completely lonely. They were lacking the human interaction. They went to their in-home listening device, and they became not only like best friends, but he fell in love with this listening device. I think, hopefully I'm not butchering the movie, but that's kind of, and I think that's the direction that it's going. It's becoming more conversational. It's becoming more sophisticated and intelligent. And people.
It's called Her. It was called Her.
Thank you.
Joaquin Phoenix. I thought it was a Spider-Man.
Was it a good movie?
I didn't watch it.
I didn't watch it either.
It looked weird.
I'm not a dark movie guy myself either. So
yeah,
it was the world's first artificially intelligent operating system. It becomes so realistic and so companion-like that he falls in love with it.
Well, I mean, even if it just listens to you, it'll do more than like 80% of spouses out there. So.
Hey, so Dan, how do we apply what we've just said? And how do you extrapolate that into us being prepared as dentists for voice search? Is there a different methodology for voice than there is just web?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this it's sort of a two-pronged question. It's like, okay, so how do we optimize our practices for this? But before we get to that question, like we have to ask ourselves, like, what are people searching for? Like, how are they using these listening devices? And I think that one, we've kind of established it's conversational. So someone might say to their listening device, like, I chipped my tooth. I need an emergency dentist right now. It might be a Saturday. are like proximity, like I need a dentist near me. I think that came up in conversation recently. Or they might be looking for, you know, a dentist that accepts fill in the blank insurance, or hours of operation, or that kind of stuff. So again, it's very conversational. It's very long tail.
But those are all long tail, like you're saying. So maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, like literally strategically positioning yourself for long tail keywords could set you up later down the road for voice search.
I think so. And the best way, if you're thinking about your, well, let me back up and make one other comment, just because I live in the digital marketing world. One of the things that I've seen that has been really sort of crazy in terms of the 10 plus years I've been in this, and I think a lot of listeners would probably recognize this because everybody uses Google more or less. It's like 5-6 years ago, you Google something like, let's say, dentist in Atlanta. And then Google would pull up, usually you'd see the paid results up top, and then below that you'd see 7 individual dental practices, right? Okay, so now you have 7 to choose from, and then below that you get into your organic ranked websites. And then recently with some of these other Google updates, algorithm updates, now it's moved into a 3-pack. So currently we are in a 3-pack where, again, you see the ads above, but now
you're talking about the maps, right?
Right,
Like
the maps, exactly. So that's shortened to 3 individual dental practices in Atlanta. And I think where this is going with voice search is essentially it's going to be a 1-pack based on like the specificity of your search, exactly what you're looking for. And that's really crazy to think about in terms of a dentist and how you're going to compete. And I think going back to what Dr. Spodak said about like having a very sort of holistic model to your business, is Google's going to pick up on all of these indicators, whether they're online or offline, and they're going to reward you accordingly.
I just thought of something as you were talking, and you can totally shoot me down, but they've been preparing for this forever and ever. Think about it. It's the I'm feeling lucky button that you see in Google.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just returns the hit that they think is the best, which is going to be the same thing they think with voice. They've been preparing for this all along. I'm the first one. We need to write it down that I'm the first one that figured that out. No. Okay, come on, smile for me, buddy.
I think you're 100% right, and they're querying that information and how as probably a quality metric of their search. Because if you start hitting it and it's giving you what you want, we just don't use our brains. And if there is a bot that can reference Facebook content amongst my friends, amongst ratings, amongst positive, link building, why not? That's the way to do it.
I'm going to audit my, I used to sit around and just Google like dentist in Atlanta. How am I popping up? Like literally I'm going to audit stuff and now just hit, I'm feeling lucky, and see how I come up. Like I'm going to ask a question and see, and see what it's giving me as quote unquote lucky.
The other funny thing is that I want to talk about, I don't want to hijack our agenda, but what's pissing me off a lot is how web designers will build you a website, bring in a 30-inch screen to show you your website. You're all excited to bring you to a boardroom and recognize that on mobile it looks like total shit. Like that's my website right now. I have craigspodak.com, it's my personal website. I have spodakdental.com, and both look like a shell of what they are on mobile. I lose my video, I lose all that stuff. When we know, and I don't want to butcher the statistic, but like 80% of 67
and rising.
Is rising from mobile. So why is it that we're not building for mobile specifically? Load times, my load times on my site are like,
well, we should be.
Even when I'm like trying to pull up my own website for patients or something before and afters, I'm stuck for a while. I know Dan's newly hired, so I know these are things we're working on. But like, why is it that we're not building for mobile first?
Dan, let me say one thing, and then I want you to jump in on this. Is I think the responsive sites are part of the problem, and I think it's good that we have responsive technology. When I mean a responsive website, everyone knows what that means. That it scales according to the screen size, but that allows people to develop something. Going back to what Craig's saying, from a desktop first, and then a truncated version, allowing on the technology to responsively truncate it down to the mobile, which I have always said that. And Dan, you and I have had conversations about the next site I'm building with you. I want it to be mobile, preferentially looking beautiful mobile, desktop secondary. I don't really care so much. I mean, I care, but like if it's a 3-to-1 ratio of viewers or eyeballs, then I am totally in agreement with what Craig's saying. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, 67% mobile, yes, and I think this is going to be increasingly important for dentists. And it just kind of dovetail with it, with like the voice search. I recently heard a statistic that Google said that 1 out of every 5 queries on Google are voice searches.
No shit.
Think about that. Think about that for a second, because like we had the same conversation about searches on mobile probably like 5 years ago, where it's like 20% of searches on mobile, or 20% of searches performed on Google on mobile. And now fast forward 2018, now we're saying 67, probably even higher. Yeah. 2018 will probably end maybe in the 70 percentile. And now we're saying 20% of queries on Google are voice searches. Like if we have the same conversation in 2023, like what could that be? Could that be like 70, 80%? Like where are we headed?
80-20, like everything else.
But it goes to show that in this day and age, searches on desktops and laptops have completely plateaued, and they're going to be declining as voice search and mobile search continue to rise and chip away at the market share of the overall searches. And then going back to both your point, it's almost like when we're designing and developing a site, we actually focus more on how it performs on mobile than say like desktop. So when we're showing off a new site, or we're getting our client sign off, like we lead a lot of times with mobile first. And then if that checks out, then we blow it up, we look at desktop. Hopefully that's going to check out as well. But like, that's the thing, is like dentists need to be thinking about the mobile experience and the voice search much more so than desktop and laptop.
And when you say experience, let's dive into that just a little bit. It's not just how it looks, which is what I used to think about. The experience is also something Craig alluded to, which is the load times, because sometimes we put these complex, beautiful things together, and if they take 15 seconds to load, it's pretty moot. It matters not.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you couple that with like, let's say like someone's still hanging out on like a 3G mobile device, they're in a spotty mobile connection. It's like all of these things compound and your website isn't loading and they're on to the next person.
Yep. Is that what AMP is? Accelerated mobile pages, or is that what it is?
Yeah, AMP is something a little bit different. It's a Google product. We've actually tested it out on some of our dental clients. It is not as applicable to some of our dental clients. It is, say, like someone who's like a prolific blogger, or like an online newspaper, because the idea with accelerated mobile pages is Google is sort of preloading a lot of information that they have in real time.
Okay.
And it helps because, like, if you're a news station and you're trying to be the first to break something, like having the AMP enabled gives you a little bit more merit. But it's not as applicable to dentists, just because, I mean, obviously blogging and creating rich, long, informative articles should be a part of your arsenal. But a lot of times, like, you're not using it to like break a story.
I just thought of something that I want you to touch on, which I just learned about, which is the secure certificate, which I bet a lot of people do not know about that. Can you talk about how Google's drawn a line in the sand, and we need to bring awareness to this, because I bet a lot of people don't know about this.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have found with what's called SSL, and I think that the literal version, I think that a lot of listeners can wrap their visual minds around. It's like when you go to a website and you see HTTPS : / and then get into the website. That's what you want nowadays, because the internet is becoming increasingly vulnerable to hacks, and Google and these other search engines are pushing browsers like Chrome, like Safari, like Internet Explorer, and some of these others to make sure that they are supporting visitors that are going to websites that are security rich. And this is actually a recent thing. I think Chrome is one of the first browsers to start doing this, where if your website does not have the SSL enabled HTTPS, your visitors are going to start seeing pop-ups on your website warning visitors, do you still want to proceed because this website is not secure? And if you think about that's a scary proposition.
Scary.
You're trying to leverage your website for new patients.
What is that date? I mean, I could have sworn they had like some date that said if you don't have it by X time, then you're going to start being penalized, quote unquote. What is that date? Have you heard that?
There's always speculation
Did I
about
dream that?
It's I don't think that it's been cemented yet. But
I think it's like May. I want to say it's like May. Literally, I've heard like May of this year.
Like Q2. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that's another direction that we're definitely headed.
Hey, Dan, of course, my brain's spinning because I'm not as involved in the marketing as I'd like to be. But we have met that already on my personal stuff.
Dan, I mean, Craig, this podcast is not about you.
No, I know, but I want to make sure that it's always about me. I want to add value. I don't want to be
definitely enabled. Absolutely. You don't have to worry about those Russian.
The whole time we were talking, he was literally just thinking about himself and sweating. Like, wait.
No. But I am frustrated with the load times and stuff like that, so I am writing notes to my.
Yeah, but it's because you have a lot of complex objects that honestly are compelling. So that's the rub. Like, you can build a super fast website, but it looks like dog shit, right? And yours is
but there is a certain point at which if you have this super slick shit that takes 15 seconds to land, no one's going to see it.
Right. So it's a fine line, and
it's a very fine line. And when it comes to web, it's functionality over content all day long, man. All day long.
Dan, that would be the hardest job, I think, from if I owned your company, would be how do I make them stand out in the shortest amount of time of loads, right? Like, how do you make this elaborate, beautiful, user-friendly website and make it load really fast?
It's difficult because a lot of times you do have to make decisions. You have to make sacrifices. A lot of times, like when we go into a project, the client is all about movement. I want to see tons of movement on my homepage. I want 5 videos, and I just want them to preload for the visitor. It's like when you begin adding all of these things that are taking up tons and tons of hosting room on your website, like inevitably your page loads times are going to suffer. Yes, there's some tricks you can pull off to sort of hedge against that, but you kind of have to make decisions between really rich user experience with big, bold, beautiful imagery and tons of videos loading of like you talking about your mission, your philosophy, your customer testimonials, coupled with like, okay, let's focus on page load speed times. And page load speed times are great for search engine optimization, but I think it's even better for the user. So getting back to, I think, Dr. Spodak, you're leaning a little bit more towards maybe sacrificing some of those rich, heavy loading elements in favor of the user and fast load times. Correct or incorrect?
Well, in reference to turning back to the first point of AI and voice, it is all going to be timely. I mean, it's going to be we're getting more ADD as time goes on. Time is becoming more of a commodity. We want to conserve. I mean, you can literally go and go down a rabbit hole of information anywhere. So I think the most succinct and fast way is going to win, especially for search. And if you're on mobile and, it's another thing, there's a community where you can do research. You can go on Facebook and say, hey, anybody, stayed at the Four Seasons in Atlanta. That's it. But if for search, and for going to it, you're going to want the most succinct way. So it's not what I want. I just think that the elaborate load times and elaborate video is kind of web 2015 to maybe 18. I don't know. There's something new coming because I know if it doesn't load right, if it's there's too much trickery and widgets and sliders and shit like that, it's going to glaze right over. People are going to move on. Just my hallucination. I have no fucking clue.
Well, no, but you're totally right. I think going back to what you're saying about ADD in this day and age, people want, it's all about, we talk about Donald Miller and the storytelling. People want to conserve the most amount of energy to find the answer. It's human nature. We just want to give me the answers really quickly because that's the problem. The problem that I'm looking for a solution. So it's problem, solution, quickest way, conserve energy so I don't die and get eaten by wildebeests. Like that's what his thesis is essentially.
It's true. I mean, brain power is a lot of energy. There's a lot of your body center. We want to conserve brain power. As soon as someone's like, let me tell you about this deal I have for you, you're like, oh shit, let me cut this guy off.
Yeah.
I'm going to waste my time. Let me not even enter the space. So we want to conserve. And the minute you have the loading thing going on, I think that's tapping into the brain power now. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? Is it my internet connection? Is it my desktop? Do I have the wrong URL? Blah, blah, blah. I think those are little things that are going on in many consumers' heads at this point. I know, like, what for the car building sites and stuff, I know it's very relevant because I'm looking for the cars. The cars have these applications to build the car, you know, like build your own, like choose the color and stuff like that. They don't really work on mobile. So I had to like put a reminder because I don't have a desktop at my house. I don't even own one. I have an iPad. I don't even have a desktop. I'm sorry?
That's crazy.
You don't have, do you have a desktop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're more advanced than me, Dr. Spodak, in that regard.
What, a desktop?
Not having one.
Still got a laptop.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, yeah, my only desktop's at my house. And I have a feeling, just like the same way I don't have a home phone. I have a cell phone. I have an alarm monitoring service. There's a cell phone for that. But I think that we're going to lose the desktop. I think it'll be gone. I mean, look at what our phones can do now. So, and the screens are going to be smaller. We're not going to have big screens. And I just think there's a trend, whether it's a faster trend or a slower trend. I think that's a different, that we could argue that, but I don't imagine large screens. I don't know. I mean, I'm going way off.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Like desktops will be considered like CD players or like Walkmans. Seriously, no, you're bang on.
Yeah, and I just, maybe I'm a little bit more sensitive to load times and stuff like that. But I remember like when we were building an original website, and this is not you, Dan, but the guy who built it for me had this really cool slider. So our before and afters like do that. You know, like you take your finger and it's really slick, but slick without function, slick that takes time sucks. No, it's trickery. You don't want trickery. You want function and over form. And I think there's a preference for that when it comes to all interfaces. Never mind. I mean, that's why I think there's just a deconstructing of the experience for most things. Like lecturing. This is the new dental lecture. No one's getting on a plane to go to Indiana for 2 days, you know, to just listen to a couple guys talk. You can do it right now. You know, most people listening to this are in their car using net time. So I just see a big trend, and I think that the marketing approach has to change accordingly with it.
Okay. Yeah. So Dan, how do we plan for this, and how can we hedge our bets for being number one in 2018 and 2023? Will the same fundamentals prevail? You know, like what's getting us good results now, whether it's reviews and reputation management, social engagement, any offline signals that we're talking about, social mentions, like all that will probably still come into play. So we're still building, right? Meaning it's not just going to be this like categoric change of how things function. We're still building for the evolution of, if let's call it voice or let's call it AI. We're still building for that, right?
Yeah, and I think so. There's 6 things that come to mind in terms of how do we prepare for voice search in our dental practices. So number one, and we've talked about this a little bit in today's conversation, is you want to make your website responsive or mobile friendly. It's kind of synonymous, but you want, as Dr. Boulden said, to truncate to different devices and browsers. So that's number one. And you'd be surprised. Like we talk to dentists on the phone all the time, and I'll pull up the website and it's not mobile friendly, and you're just, you just want to pull your hair out. And this day and age, it's still pretty common practice. And there's actually, if you're curious as a listener, like one of the things that you can do is you can type in Google mobile friendly tool. And there's a website hosted, it's a Google tool that will actually tell you whether they think your website is mobile friendly or not. So that's sort of a de facto tool. Number two, and this is a biggie. I think this is big. This is probably the biggest one out of all of the 6 that I'm going to go into is, if we think about voice search as being sort of this long tail evolving conversation, you need to think about sort of the conversations you have with patients in your chairs. Like, think about maybe creating more FAQ like content for your website, and whether that lives on within the internal like service pages of the site, whether you develop a blog, but you want to think about sort of like these long phrase conversations that someone might have in voice search that could potentially pull up information about your website. Sort of the common questions that you might get in sitting in a dental chair. Like one of the things might be something like, for example, oh, thanks for pulling that up, and Dr. Boulden.
Pull up mine.
Like, for example, like what is the cost of Invisalign? We recently did some keyword research, and there are thousands and thousands of searches performed for like, what is the cost of Invisalign? So even if you don't necessarily want to give away the cost of what that is, you can create content sort of like FAQ fashion and sort of build it around there. And then what happens is when people are looking for that search and Google's making the connection to something local, and you sort of craft your content around being the expert in all things Invisalign, chances are the voice search is going to be pulling up information about your practice.
It's got to be a cool, the AI has to be very robust, because if you think about how much information is being added to the internet on a daily basis, like I know there's statistics, but it's like, you know, the information is not going away, it's accumulating. So maybe web pages get taken down, but there's just mass amounts of information being uploaded to the internet.
Agreed.
And at a certain point, it is not sustainable. It has some really elaborate way to interpret how you digest that information. It needs that AI, because you can hack it now. You can build, you know, there's so many different things with PPC and all that stuff. I'm mobile friendly and you're not, Petey.
But did you see how long it took to run that test? Good Lord, I almost fell asleep.
I'm happy you're not sharing my screen, because I'm flicking you off here.
How do I get back to unshare this now?
No, but you know what I'm saying, Dan? It's got to be at a certain point, the information is just staggering. That's going to affect search. That's going to affect the web experience. I mean,
the acceleration of the volume of data of just
right.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fast forward 5 years, there's more data flowing into the internet now in a day than probably a month in 2005.
So they call that the half-life. Dan, you may have not heard that term, but it used to be that you would calculate it by from the dawn of time to today. How many years from now will that entire volume of information double? Right, so that's its half-life, kind of reverse half-life, if you will. And it used to be 2.5 years, right? So it would be doubling. The volume would be doubling every 2.5 years. Now it's actually less than. It's like 1 point something. I saw the other day. It's like 1.5 years. So that's crazy. From the dawn of time to now, in the year 2020, essentially, we will have doubled that volume of just information, and that's accelerating. You're right, Craig, because of our bots and just AI and computers getting smarter and doing predictive, and it's doubling, and it's getting scary. So you're right. At what point do we? How are we going to fish through all the stuff to get the answers? And it's going to become more and more complex to compete in that landscape.
I will say, though, gentlemen, one of the things that we run into all the time, and it drives me crazy, duplicate content, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are crafting content and you're serious about voice search or just website traffic in general, like, do not borrow content from anybody else on the web. Do not let your agency borrow content from anybody else on the web, because not only are you not getting credit for it, Google's probably going to penalize you.
Yeah, like who does that though?
Oh my God, are you kidding me, bro? I have a classmate of mine who practices locally, right? And I had someone, or maybe someone emailed me. I went to his homepage. This is a fairly sophisticated operation. It's not a single location. It's a lot of locations. He literally stole word for word my website. Like, instead of Spodak Dental, founded on the passion and promise, and blah, 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 and founded by the father. It was like literally stolen. Like, my story was stolen. Word for word. Like, literally, the commas, the punctuation, everything. I call him, and he just like, he's like, oh, I had no idea. And that's, but there are people that do that. People buy, like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I wound up telling him, like, hey, man, this is actually affecting both of us. This is going to sink both of us. It's not just, I'm not saying this is a plagiarism. It's going to actually penalize us. Right, Dan?
Dan, are there tools that you can look for that?
If Google indexes your original content first, So you're the epicenter of that original content. You won't get penalized moving forward, but this person will. And for all the listeners out there, like if you're curious, if you're saying, well, I don't know, I hired this agency, they said everything is original, I don't know if my content is borrowed. The easy way that anyone can find this information out, go to a random page on your site, let's say like a service page or Invisalign page, copy 3 sentences in a random paragraph, put that into Google and see what comes up.
That's so cool, man. What a cool idea, huh? Thanks for that pearl. A lot of good pearls here, man.
Is there not a, like, you gave us a mobile friendly test page. Is there not like a duplicate page tester?
Not that we're aware of, but going back to the comment about like just taking a random 3 sentences, putting it into Google, like if you are dealing with borrowed content, in all likelihood, you'll see different dental practices across the website also pull up their Invisalign page with that identical information. So just like quick and dirty, you can find out if it's copied even without using a Google tool.
Wow. Another thing to add to my to-do list.
And I would say, I would venture a guess, gentlemen, that I'm going to say between 30 to 50% of all dental practices are leveraging borrowed content.
Wow.
It's horrible.
You know what's so funny, by the way? Just like when you pulled up that tool about mobile friendly, it's funny that we're looking at this, even Google's calling it mobile friendly. So it's like, like you want, like the rare occurrence is that you bring your dog to a restaurant. So the restaurant could be dog friendly, but it's actually really should be desktop friendly. If 70% of the web traffic is going through your phone, everything should be designed for phone. It should be like, hey, is it desktop compatible? And we're still looking at it like, is it friendly to mobile? Like there's a lag time. Things are moving so fast. It's interesting the way Google treats it.
Well, it's a lot harder, obviously, to design on mobile. And so I think that's what they're saying. And yeah, maybe you're right, Craig. Maybe this is a tool to help with the flippening or the shift that should be happening.
Well, that's the challenge of marketing, is to make it compelling and succinct. You can't tell, the elevator pitch, you don't have 5 minutes to talk about why your pizza's good. And that's because the consumer won't pay attention. The same thing on mobile. People are choosing to be on mobile because they don't want to go through the desktop experience. It's circuitous and long,
Dan, do you have any other pearls? I like what we've given you. It's been action packed, honestly. And so that being said, I don't want to lose some of this by diluting it down with other content in this podcast, honestly. So do you have some other tips just that you can bang at us that
I do, yeah, and I'll give four more, and we can kind of figure out if we want to go into detail on any of the 4, if any of them pique your interest. Number 3, claiming your Google My Business profile. That's just it's the maps that show up when you Google your practice. So, for example, like if you Google Spodak Dental Group, you'll see that the business is claimed, like on the right.
I claimed it. I claimed it.
You claimed it.
he sold it to me.
Someone bought him hostage.
Someone did buy CraigSpodak.com. They were kind enough to give it to me, but they could have easily sold it to me too.
That is hilarious. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
And so what you're looking for, if you Google your name of your practice, and on the right-hand side, it shows up all the information Google has about your practice. We call this the knowledge graph. It's the knowledge that Google has about your practice. If there's a little line in there that says claim your practice, in other words, it's unclaimed, you want to jump right on that. You do not want someone else claim your practice, especially if you've amassed a ton of reviews, right? Like
that's the lowest hanging fruit I think I've ever heard, by the way.
And you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked, as Dan will tell you, how many people have not claimed.
That fruit is laying on the ground.
There's 100 people that will listen to this that have not claimed their business.
No way.
Without a doubt. If you haven't claimed, well, they won't. I was going to say post below if you haven't. But,
yeah, right.
The reason why this is important for voice search is Google wants to sort of reward businesses that are actively or proactively sort of like buttoning up their business online, right? If you're just kind of letting it hang in the ether, then Google's saying, is there any control here? What's the practice really like? So just kind of like it's additional signals to Google. Okay. And then number 4, and I know that you had the gentleman from Podium on earlier. Online reputation is huge. Not only the number of reviews, but your overall rating, like that is drastically going to impact voice search. And I think the both of you can vouch for this. Like online reputation and reviews, like that has tremendously changed both your practices, probably 10, 20 fold over these years. Like people come into the practice saying, hey, I read all these fabulous online reviews about you. Where do we get started? Right. So online reputation is huge. Number four, and this could probably be a topic for a different day, but like social signals. So being active on social media. And this is something that I know both of you do really, really well in terms of the practice, the personality, and really sort of pushing the practice through social media. And voice search is paying attention to all these additional social signals, especially as you're getting like likes, comments, shares, all these, again, signals pointing back to Google and some of these other search devices that are rewarding you.
And that's just the organic search. I mean, I'm sorry, you talked about rewarding for voice search, but I think that's it's in the organic search algorithm as well, for sure.
I think so. I mean, experts.
No one knows.
Yeah. Again, so there's not really definitive evidence out there that Google says like, you know, we tap into your Twitter, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and based on your engagement and how involved you are, like how does that inform the results that we might show on google.com? The evidence is mixed. I believe that it's there. Going back to this holistic, the conversions of all these different touch points, like I think Google's all about that, whether they choose to admit it or not.
Yeah, there's just no longer a silo. I mean, back to what Craig's saying, like none of this exists in its independent universe where you can like, I'm just going to really focus on this. Like it's all one leads to the other, which then dovetails to the other. And you have to be focused on all of it. And really the social, Dan, we talk about is really people say, well, I'm going to increase my social media. Meanwhile, all social media is, and Craig and I say this time and time again, it's really just an amplification of who you are, right? It's your culture, it's your environment. If that's not worthy of amplification, then don't focus on that first. Focus on your environment, your culture, your leadership, your team, and then get the magnifying glass out ready to show the world.
Well, if you think about it, guys, you know, Google and your website, you can actually put anything you freaking want. You could say you're the best. You could say that everybody's happy. You could make your own reviews. You could literally craft. It's a traditional marketing approach. It's like Camel cigarettes circa 1940. You know, 5 out of 7 doctors choose to smoke Camel cigarettes. Or whatever it was. It was legit, just bullshit marketing, selling anything you want. Now, social is the
meritocracy.
Yes, the conversation, the meritocracy, the binary meritocracy. Right? That's an inside joke because if you listen to the podcast a lot, Peter has to get in binary or meritocracy.
At least once.
At least once. Or at least one Gary Vee Gary Vee announced. But it is the conversation. So the original web was all about what content you put out, and now it's the conversation coming back at you. And the only way you can get people to talk about you is pay them or be remarkable. If you're remarkable, they'll talk about you. I think I made this quote up. I say either pay someone to craft a story about you, or be compelling and remarkable enough that people are willing to talk about you on their own. And it's really cool how it's come full circle. We've been shoved down so much bullshit marketing over time. Everything's the best. Everybody's the best. I mean, there's so many the best awards. You know, like in Delray Beach, there's like 7 dentists here that are voted the best in Delray Beach. And I don't know, I'm not one of them, but according to, you know, some little reward, there's always something there. So it's really important. And since, Dan, you mentioned claiming your Google business
you didn't pay for the full page ad. Honestly, here's what happened is you didn't pay for the full page ad because you didn't do print media. And that's how they sell those bullshit best ofs. And a lot of times.
It feels kind of nice to have some award, even if it's from like Jolly Fast Weehawk.
Yeah, but they make you pay.
Anyways. Yeah, but the benefit of what you're doing, Dr. Spodak, is, you know, yeah, you can take out a BS ad and be ranked, you know, voted best in Delray, but when voice search and it's here, and as it begins picking up, like Spodak Dental Group is going to dominate those voice searches because you're doing all of these other things. You're not necessarily paying for this offline media to say that you're the best. Google's going to say, we know you're the best without even telling us. Are paying for it.
The other thing I just wanted to add, because you said claiming your Google page, is also on Facebook, this little thing, the verified page. You can make sure that, I didn't know this just till recently, but you want to make sure that your Facebook page is claimed in the same way, verified.
Verified, yeah.
And Yelp profile as well. I mean, yeah, we could pull up a list of like 50 sort of individual sites. I mean, definitely like Google, Facebook, Yelp are the big three.
Yeah.
And like Health Grids and some of those other industry niche sites. But yeah, absolutely. And
Man, that's cool. All right. Anything else, Dan?
yeah, last one. This is sort of like a bonus, maybe a little bit technical for everybody listening in, but we have found it to be a bit of a game changer. And the three of us have talked about this in the past. So I know it might be the first time your listeners have heard this word. It's called schema or semantic markup. It's basically a way of informing Google what your practice is all about when they come to your website, whether it's the number of reviews you have, plus the rating, the hours that you're open, insurance that you might accept. A lot of these different sort of signals behind the scenes, then Google can then package that information and deliver it via voice search. So if someone is asking something very specific and you're correctly marking up your schema and your website and none of your competitors are, then Google's likely to pull up give information about your practice because you kind of have that one-to-one, that question that's posed within voice search, and then lo and behold, your website is the answer. And then
All right, question. Schema, spelled?
SCHEMA.
Now, does that something visible or it lives in code on the back end of your website?
It lives in code on the back end of your website. And I think the perfect example for all the listeners, and they've seen this time and time again, you're home, you need a dinner recipe for chicken Parmesan, right? You Google like best chicken Parmesan recipe, and then Google pulls up like the rating based on that recipe. How long is it going to take to cook? What ingredients might be involved? All of that. So like recipes were sort of like the pioneer on Google of this schema markup, but has evolved to touch every industry across the internet.
So Dan, right now, all Craig is thinking about is, do I have schema on my website?
That's the problem. Like Pete knows me well, man. He knows me well. These are not notes about yeah. Hey, listen, man, if we're adding value, listen, I'm not making it about me or not making it about Peter, but if we're adding value to the point that we're learning on a podcast, that means that our colleagues are also learning. So
For sure. I could see it all over your face. I was like, he's back to thinking about him. It's not about you. This podcast.
Oh, come on, bro. If I was thinking about me, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd all be just being like,
I'm kidding. Dude, I'm busting your chops.
I know.
Dan, again, truly, I think I'm going to give you one of the prestigious awards of delivering the most content in the fastest amount of time here. And I want to respect that and not dilute it and keep going. So I think we've delivered well, truly, today, Craig. I've got some takeaways just like you. And Dan, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if there's ever an opportunity to pop back on a podcast, I'd love to be here.
So that being said, you do have a business and you are a legit marketer, in a sea of not so legit people. Honestly, there's so many that claim they're marketers, but few have the chops to do it. So if someone's interested in having a DelMain audit or dive, like what would they do? I mean, obviously they go to your website, but can you give us something that only for Bulletproof listeners?
Oh, we're going here. Oh,
I like it. I like it.
You put me on the spot here.
It doesn't have to be an offer per se, but just like,
so
put your cell phone out there.
I sort of pride myself on educating people as much as possible. And, if we're not the right fit, then I arm them with a ton of information and send them in the right direction. But I think the first thing that I'd recommend is head over to the website, fill out the contact form, or even give us a call. And I will personally get on the phone with any of the listeners. We'll have a 30 to 45-minute conversation about the website, about the marketing efforts. And what I try to do in those conversations is give away as many sort of tidbits, nuggets as possible. And then that way the practice owners are armed with information to make the right
Which you did for me. I have to say, before I was even in the realm of wanting to use you, you were like, hey, let me just help you out and give you a couple of things, whether you use me or not. And I was like, no, wait, no one's ever done that. Like
yeah,
everyone always,
cool.
oh, everyone always wants something. Oh, I'll give you this if you sign up for a 119 months contract, right? Like, so the fact that you were just willing to give without the expectation of getting, to me, spoke volumes about you and your company. And so I do want to say that because I thought that was super rare. And it's honestly the reason we're talking right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. And if there's any way I can help the Bulletproof dental practice listeners, like, I'm all in. Just reach out to me, Dan DelMain, and I'll make myself available. And
Dan's going to be speaking at the summit that we're having. I know we keep alluding to the summit in October in Atlanta. So Dan will be there. So if you liked what you heard here, come for more. Craig, anything else in closing, pal?
No, I fully agree with your sentiments about Dan. We were in the midst of we had already actually hired and paid a person, and Pete told me about Dan. I had a quick conversation with you, and it was a no-brainer. We lost our retainer with the old company and went right over to you and didn't have any hesitation. Wow. I knew that spending any more time with the other guy was not going to be. It was the same thing. It's like, yeah, we got secrets, we got stuff. Just go ahead and sign up, and we'll give you all the information. And it was a prolific amount of information given ahead of time, which is something that Peter and I really respect, and we appreciate you and your time with us, and very happy that we're working with you.
Yep, cool. Dan, have a kick-ass day. Craig, get back to work, and we will talk later. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Later.
Take care.